Hey everyone, it's Desiree, and I am here with Altenew, and I am going to probably start another series, but these are going to be 4x4 cards. And what I'm going to be using is their subscription called Mini Delight. Now, these are just very small stamp sets. They are a 2x3 stamp set, but you get an image and a sentiment and a die that goes with it. So don't think just because you have the one image that you're limited to what you could make with these stamps and dies. There is a lot. So I'm going to show you 4 different ways, but I am going to keep them up to a 4x4 card base. I think they'll be really cute. So again, I'm using Buttercup, Victorian, Strength, and Birthday Love from the subscription. So for the first card, I pulled out my Distress Oxides, and I pulled out Mowed Lawn and Broken China. So on this card here, and I'm looking at that, this card or this panel actually measures approximately 3¼ by 3¼ So I am just going around that edge with the Mowed Lawn to basically frame it. Now what I'm using is a piece of cardstock that has been laminated. That is the perfect base or palette if you need one. Now I'm going to stamp the Buttercup. Now what's great is the Buttercup is one of their layering stamps. So you get to have, even though it's just one stamp, you have one of their laying stamps. Now, the colors that I used were Warm Sunshine, Caramel Toffee, and Paper Bag. So, of course, the first layer that I'm using here is Warm Sunshine. I will use my heat tool just between each one a little bit, just to dry the inks. You can just stamp immediately right after. I do find that your inks will bleed. When you stamp the first time, the ink does take a little bit to dry. So I do like to dry in between. Yep, I learned that from Jennifer McGuire. And it does help. You get a crisper image when you do allow the inks to dry between each layer. So the next color that's coming in is Caramel Toffee, and this is the second layer that I'm putting on. Now you can tell, because I cut the paper, because I didn't put this in my positioning tool correctly, I had to cut off an edge which made it crooked, which shifted where the other flower was. So, okay, we adapt. We just adapt. So I'm going to complete these 2 here. And then the last color that I'm going to use is Paper Bag. And that's just going to be the final center. I do stamp a third one, just so I could have that ready for my card front. When it comes to the layering, so I'm stamping this 3 times because I've got to have clusters of 3. Now what's great again with these stamp sets, you can make a single focal point, those clean and simple cards. And again, I don't like to use the word simple because simple, I don't know, to me it's almost like a negative word, but simplistic, clean lines, that's where I'm trying to go there. There are card makers that like to keep them clean, or when they make a note card or a set, to keep them clean. There's not so much going on the card. These are perfect for that. Absolutely. Okay, back to the card real quick. So you can see I die cut using the die that does come with it when it comes to the subscription. And then I just use one of my alcohol markers to draw a line to come down for the stem. and I'm going to use my foam squares to prop up the last one. I used my liquid adhesive for the other two, and I'm putting them down in the corner. I'll be using the sentiment, which I am absolutely in love with, that says, "What's up, Buttercup?" Usually I say, "Suck it up, Buttercup." But this is close. So I'm just going to line this up onto my card panel. Now, I am going to use my grid, and the grid on the acrylic block to make sure that that is lined up. So, again, you don't have to have a stamp positioning tool just to make sure everything is straight. Between, if you can get or have a grid mat, or the lines in your acrylic blocks, that would help you tremendously. So I stamped my ink using the Altenew Obsidian ink. It is very similar to the VersaFine Black. Still playing around with it, but I do like the crisp image that it does give me. So I'm just going to show the panels that I'm creating. So that was our first panel, and then at the end I'll show you the cards that I put together. So the next one we're going to use is Birthday Love. Now this one is an adorable heart balloon. I'm first going to stamp my sentiment. I wanted to make sure that that was down at the bottom towards the center, and it says "Sending Birthday Love." I'm then going to come in and stamp the three. I'm going to have 3 balloons on the card. The colors that I'm going to use, now you can see I pulled in my stamp positioner and I'm like, nah, I don't need that. And for this you don't. For the balloons, I'm using Lime and Fresh Leaf, Fuchsia and Magenta, and then Maple Yellow and Honey Drizzle. So with the lighter color, I'm going to stamp the balloon, and that's the solid part, what you see me stamping now. Then for this stamp set, there is an outline. So you can choose to stamp that in black. You can choose to stamp that in any color that you would want. I chose to go with a darker shade from the same color family. Just to emphasize that. Again, you can go any way. You can also choose a brown if you wanted to. So any color that you would want to choose for your outline, you can. So I just went with the 2-tone. I will come in with my black fine liner, my Faber-Castell fine liner, and I will add the detail of the string. And again, I'll just doodle those strings onto the card. I do enjoy doodling. I think it adds something to a card. After I do put those strings onto the balloons, I will come in with some broken china just to go around the outside of this panel. Again, just to frame it. You know, whether you have the cardstock to create a mat, you may not, or maybe you don't want to use that. Just by putting some ink, whether it's an oxide or a regular ink or a distress ink, that will put a frame on your image. So you can do either way that you're looking for, but just by putting that little bit helps to frame that. For our next one, we are going to use the stamp set called Strength. Of course, I am in love with this only because it's a feather. I love feathers. Feathers and butterflies. So I think the sentiment is great. It says, "I admire your strength." I'm going to stamp that down onto the bottom corner of this panel. Now this panel here is 4 inches by 4 inches, and the one previously is actually 3 3/4 by 3 3/4, and I'll have all of the colors that I used and the panel cut sizes and my card base size on my blog. So make sure you click on that link down below. So I am using Cloudy Sky to stamp my feathers. Now I'm just stamping them randomly, so you can see just with this one image, you can create a background, a patterned paper background look. So again, it's just another way to use these stamps. So the first two I showed you, you can make them the focal point. Here I'm showing that you can create a pattern in the background using these stamps. So on another piece of paper, I am going to stamp one more feather, and I'm going to use Nimbus, which is a beautiful dark blue gray. It's one of their newer colors. And then the other part, it's not a layering, but it is like a fill-in stamp on the tip of the feather. I'm going to use the same color to fill that in, just to give it some color. Now, again, think if you had all of these, feathers going in a row, and you use like a gray, and then you use the rainbow going through the tips of those feathers. So again, a lot of possibilities. I want to keep the background light, so I'm going to use Cloudy Sky again to use for that solid portion of the feather, and I'm going to fill that in around. The Altenew inks, which of course is what I'm using here, I do like the way that these are inks that also, what do they call that, level out. So even though you can see some white spots as I'm stamping, they do fill in and become a more solid color. So that's what that looks like, our back panel. I'm going to use the die to cut out this one feather. And then once I have that feather cut out, I am going to come around that, yes, with Vintage Photo. I know. It made an appearance. It had to, right? Yes. Again, it helps it to stand out. It's allowing that one feather that's on top of the sentiment to be the focal point, to push all of the other feathers that are on that page as the background to the background. Again, that's what my eye tells me, but that's what Vintage Photo is going to do. It's going to help accentuate that item, make it stand out, so that it does become the focal point. I will prop that feather up with some double-sided foam squares, and I'm going to set that right above the sentiment. So for our last card that I'll be showing, I'm using Victorian. Now again, this is another layered type stamp by Altenew, of course. So I chose some really bright colors. So for the house, I went with Autumn Blaze and Sunkissed, Ultraviolet and Wisteria, and Lagoon and Mountain Mist. So I went with a teal, a purple, and like an orange, a tangerine color. So I'm stamping the first layer, and then I'm going to come in with the darker shades for the next layer. Now, one of the things that I absolutely love about layering stamps, and they don't have to be perfect. The images, you don't have to be perfectly in line when it comes to these. I'm using an acrylic block, and when I line these up, I do come like from the top down. I slide it into the image that I've just stamped. For me, that helps me to see that it's snapped in. Now you can see with the teal, I was a little off. I was a little lower than what I should have been. But you can see now if I look at this image upside down and come up to it, I get better alignment. Am I stressing out over that teal one? Absolutely not. I think again, it's a hand-stamped image. So it will be just fine. I will use the die to cut out these 3 images so that we can place them on our panel. Now, what I'm doing here, I took the 3 3/4, no, I'm sorry, yes, the 3 3/4 panel, and I'm going to divide that in 4s. So I'm just measuring that on my mat, and I'm going to cut in between that. So now I'm going to have 4 squares. So I went from 1 large to 4 small. I'm going to prop the houses up using foam tape on 3 of these 4 squares. Now, of course, after the fact, I remember I want to put some broken china up on the top of each of the squares and use the mowed lawn for the bottom. I still do that, and it's okay. I may get a little bit on my stamped image, but again, it's all good. So I'm going to come in, just put a little bit. I don't need a lot of color. I'm just putting a little bit of shading on each of those blocks. Once I have those done, the last block, I'm going to apply a lot more of the broken china and the mowed lawn. I'm going to almost fill that up, but have a center part that is a little bit open. So it's going to have almost like a highlight in a way. So again, a lot more ink is going to be put down onto this square. And then I'm going to stamp, you get 2 sentiments with the Victorian. One says hello and one says thanks. So I'm actually going to use the thanks, and I'm going to stamp that in the center of that panel. This panel is one that's going to be propped up. So for the others, I only propped up the homes. For this one, I'm actually going to prop up the square. So again, a little bit different dimension that's going to be seen on this card. And again, we can do that. That's the beauty of making our cards or making our note cards, whatever we're doing in the paper crafting world. So here are the 4 panels, and now I'm going to get them onto my panel. So this is what they look like. My card bases are 4 by 4, so that means that I am cutting 4 inches by 8 inches, scoring at 4. So you can see with the smaller panel that I used, I have a nice large white border going around. For the feathers, I went from edge to edge, and I even used some vintage photo around, as I said, around the large panel. Here I made sure I placed the homes within each corner so that they would have the same separation in between. And then just using a little bit of that blue and then propping that panel up just gave these cards a little bit more dimension as well. So I do hope I gave you some ideas if you already subscribe to the Altenew Mini Delight subscription. I think it is a great subscription. Something so cute. So simplistic, but there are so many things that you can do with them. I hope to show you more, give you some tips and tricks on these as I continue to receive mine. All of the products that I used will be linked down below in the video description, so make sure you click on those. And again, make sure you check my blog. I'll have all of the colors and all of the cut sizes listed within my blog for this posting. If you have any questions, make sure you leave those down in the comments, and I will make sure I get back to you as soon as I can. If you haven't already, I'd love for you to subscribe, be part of my group, just so that you can get even more tips and tricks for your arsenal in our paper crafting world. Make sure you ring the bell, because then you will know when the next video is ready for you to watch. Thank you so much for stopping by and spending just this little bit of time with me today. Remember, always enjoy, continue to stay safe and healthy, but always remember to to be creative. Take care, everyone.